see, there's no jellyfish in that tank. Those Japanese jellies didn't make it either. What you probably can't see is something that they left while they were in there. They spawned, and all that larvae settled out and became polyps. So before we talk about the polyp aspect, let's talk a little bit about why we've been so unsuccessful with wild-caught jellyfish. Truth is, I don't really have the answer at this point. Speculation on my part, based on hearsay, rumor, gossip, is there's another person in the area who has been doing jellyfish, and I understand she's been quite successful. And the rumor is that we get our water from the same place, the real ocean water. Well, she orders hers supposedly without any buffer in it. Now, is the buffer the issue, or is its chemical reaction the issue? Makes no sense to me that real ocean water, even buffered a little bit, would cause a problem unless it was some chemical reaction occurring. I did email a friend who is very knowledgeable in jellyfish, and I mentioned this to him as well, and his response was, yes, there is a chemical reaction that occurs, and that can be problematic for the jellyfish, but you can't avoid the need for the buffer. The buffer is what helps support the pH. It keeps the pH up. pH is just simply a unit of measurement on a scale of 0 to 11 or 0 to 12, 7 being the middle and salt water being just a little on the high or alkaline side, 8.0, 8.3. And there's a chemical arrangement that helps support that pH, because without it, the pH is naturally always going to decline. But anyhow, the gist of the rumor is that the real ocean water that we're using has been buffered after it was collected from the ocean, and that the use of that buffer may, I mean, if someone else doing jellyfish successfully is ordering their water without from the same place, there must be a reason for it. So the assumption is that that water, or that buffer that they use in that water, is creating the issue. And I have been, for many years, using real ocean water from that same company. Up until recently, didn't have any reason to question it. So we may try some synthetic seawater and see what happens, but that'll be another episode. So we're back to the point where we are unsuccessful keeping wild-caught jellyfish long-term. And as I've grumbled a few times in the past, that's an expensive learning curve. So try to look at it from the bright side. There are some positive things that did come out of the loss of those jellyfish, both the Gulf of Mexico jellies as well as the Japanese, and that is, while they were here in the tanks, they reproduced. Males and females. It was actually the first time I've ever seen the larvae, if that's what you want to call it, on the edge of the female's oral arms in this tank as a result of those Japanese jellies. And so they have spawned in there, that larvae has settled out, it's beginning to develop into polyps. All those little white things you see on the front panel and on the back panel, those are all jellyfish polyps. Each one of those polyps will produce numerous offspring, and continually, I shouldn't say continually, but on a regular basis, will continue to produce those. And those polyps themselves will even asexually bud off daughter polyps. So it's a colony of polyps that will always continue to increase. And not just in this tank with the Japanese jellies, but also in this tank with the Gulf of Mexico jellies. And so the other night, I was standing out here looking at the polyps in that tank. Now, granted, there's only a handful of them, not a whole lot of them, certainly not as many as the Japanese version. But I was looking at that, and I was wondering how I could not just collect those, but once I've collected them, where I could keep them. Keep in mind that those Gulf of Mexico jellyfish were in something like 80-degree water. The Japanese are in 60 degrees. So the appeal to me of those polyps is not only do I increase the diversity of livestock that I could offer, but I'm also able to take those polyps and begin to produce on my own what are referred to as tank raised. And ultimately, as I produce a few of them and they reproduce and more polyps divide, that collection of polyps becomes greater and allows me to produce more. But as I was standing there the other night thinking to myself, that's a pretty expensive tank, that whole system, just for a handful of polyps. Too bad I couldn't contain them in a small container and put them in with the moon jellyfish, the Japanese ones. And I realized the temperature again was the issue. So I stood there for a little while thinking to myself, gosh, I sure wish I had a little tiny system as opposed to a big system to put those little tiny polyps into. And as I stood there looking at a polyp tank and an ephira tank, bing! All of a sudden the light came on. And I ran in the house and got myself a clipboard and a piece of paper, and I started making little sketches and things. And next thing you know, I just developed a new product. And all of that came at the loss of those jellyfish. So, trying to look on the positive side and at the silver lining, okay, so I did lose the money on those jellyfish by losing them, but in a sense, you've got to determine where your boundaries are so that you can begin to test them, push them, and once you define the boundaries, you then try to come up with solutions, and in that process, in this case, a new product, which I think in the long run will be an inexpensive system for regular hobbyists to try to reproduce jellyfishing as well. A miniature, self-contained, complete breeding system. So I was pretty happy with myself about that. So in a sense, the loss is there. Again, I complain about the expensive learning curve, but as long as you learn something from it, or get something from it, I guess it's money well spent. At the same time, we also have all these Japanese polyps, which is part of the initial moon jellyfish system, so we can collect these out of here, move them into the regular system, and I think at this point we've kind of determined that other than trying to increase the diversity of product that we can offer, so with that in mind, I'll continue to bring in different species of wild-caught jellyfish. But I really feel at this point I need to fine-tune my efforts and begin to promote the tank-raised jellyfish. I've got the systems here for it. I've got the polyps for it. I've been reinforced with the polyps. We're going to be building a second system for a different species of sea nettles down the road, an episode on that. And I think the tank raise can be a much more reliable source of inventory that I can offer to my customers. So there is a good side to just about everything if you look hard enough. And we even have a spawning occurring with our current batch of moon jellyfish. So I think the direction that Midwater Systems and the Aquarium are going to pursue will be promoting tank-raised species of jellyfish.